Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this match video for Mud's mission taken from the website Royal Road. As always, I hope that you all enjoy this episode, and if you do, please consider supporting the channel. Also, all of these episodes will be available as a podcast on the various different podcast platforms. All the links will be down below. Chapter 49, Mist Misfire. With the advent of ego-smithing, a new category of life had been created, the construct, to which the Archon does life belong, not to Abraxas, for they are not its spawn, not to Logos, because they are merely a product of man and not man itself. In the past, all life was under the domain of a god, and it was good, it was righteous. These constructs lay outside the system which has defined our place in the universe for so long. Having no god or to ordain their fate, they violate the harmony of creation so painstakingly designed by their archons. Only ruin can come from desecrating the plans of the divine. The creation of constructs is a sin against the Almighty. I fully believe that these beings are a greater threat to this world than even the demons of the unknowable. Even the method of crafting is an affront to the divine, manipulating the free souls to create life in the domain of gods, not of mortals. I urge the Church to make clear the correct morals on the matter, outlaw the creation of these constructs, and call for an immediate campaign of extermination against those already crafted. Open letter to the Church of the Venerable Gnostics by Archbishop Priad, founder of the sect of the Split Ruin, 241 EC. Although the victory came without injury, it was clear that Mud could not yet kill these corpse worms without significant effort. Where the golem had been attacked by multiple worms at the same time, fleeing might be the only option. Each magical beast's long, undulating arms were fully capable of ripping a limb off Mud or tearing away parts of his body if it didn't react perfectly. For the time being, Mud would simply hunt on the top layer. And so, Mud and Jabrax cut through seemingly endless hundreds of giant caterpillars. Occasionally, a single corpse worm would be encountered, always heading in the direction of the ramp downwards. The area covered by the cave complexity was truly amazing, covering an area that seemed nearly half as large as the entire city above. Considering the size of the complex and the density of the enemies, a truly staggering number of insects. And that was just the first floor. According to the information from the association, this dungeon was a full 5 floors deep. Floor size and monster volume was said to decrease greatly with each level, although the monsters grew stronger and more clever to compensate. Indeed, the greatest threat during the wave would not be the hordes of giant caterpillars, but rather the truly monstrous things lurking in the deepest layers. Such threats would need to be left to others, thought Mud. Trying to face Tier 5 would simply be suicidal. Hunting here on the first floor, contributing by clearing the fodder, was a proper place for Mud. Disposing of garbage was a golem's specialty after all. At that moment, Mud had a revelation. Was not killing pests and unwanted beasts an important part of caring for a home? Indeed, vital to a great home was a great caretaker for the home. Someone capable of ridding it of unwanted pests. In that sense, slaughtering the goblins from before, these caterpillars, and even the mice behind the mansion were in service of protecting the Sithlar estate in a direct way. Household Mastery increased to level 4, Household Magic Skill increased to level 2, Kill Pest Spell obtained. Learning from its past mistakes, Mud did not immediately use the new understanding on the ideal of home to attack a nearby giant caterpillar. Instead, it checked out the description first. Spell, Kill Pest. Spell which directly blocks the soul's emanations when it attempts to project the domain against the domain's owner's will. This spell generally only functions against enemies with very weak souls, but is devastating when effective. Mud sent a question to Jabrax. Are human cities a domain? Not pausing from biting into a monster that she replied. The demon's words were slightly hard to make out. Yeah, humans act their own towns into domains. Deciding it was safe, Mud corrupted some of its mana into the ideal of home. For now, it was keeping half of its mana preemptively corrupted with the ideal of control to save time in combat, while leaving the other half uncorrupted. Taking aim at the nearby enemy, Mud imprinted the concept of removing an uninvited unto its corrupted manner. The brownish gas emerged from Mud and began flowing outwards slowly. HP reduced by 1, HP reduced by 1, HP reduced by 1, HP reduced by 1. Immediately, Mud deactivated the spell and fled from the cloud of vapor that it had produced. Thankfully, once outside the cloud, Mud's health stopped depleting. The rate of health reduction was shockingly fast. Mud hadn't only produced a tiny amount of gas and only lingered within a fraction of a second. Although it was fully within the remaining vapor, the gas caterpillar had been clinging to seemed to notice it and showed no signs of pain. Considering the events that transpired, Mud realized its mistake. The domain it was in right now was not the city of Galtheus, it's the dungeon of Galtheus. Here, in the dungeon, Mud was the unwanted outsider, and the insects are the proper residents. The spell would not be useful until the wave, it seemed. At least, the spell felt strong, though. As for the other skill increase, Mud was enjoying the increased power of its own domain. Having a sudden burst of inspiration, Mud attempted to project its mana into its far-distant domain. Unfortunately, the effort proved futile. Perhaps it would be possible once it strengthened its control, though. The idea of defending the Sithlar estate from anywhere in the world by blasting out gusts of kill pest was highly attractive. Continuing its slaughter, Mud meditated further on the ideals it knew, hoping for a new insight. Unfortunately for the golem, none came, and it continued hunting in the dungeon late into the afternoon. After killing 7 more lone corpse worms over the course of the day, Mud gained another level, and chose to strengthen its soul. Mud Golem species has increased to level 8. During sunset, Mud decided to take a break from the dungeon to handle other business. Jibrax had been complaining for a few hours about wanting a break, and Mud wanted to check out on the blacksmith. According to the almanac, the scheduled time for completion was not too far off. There was also the matter of subjugating bounty on the dungeon monsters which Mud had spotted on the bull wall. When Mud had told Jibrax that they would finally stop hunting, her speed of killing increased sharply, and the pair made a rapid start towards the stairs, leading the way to the most direct path towards the exit. The demon cut a rapid path past several startled groups of delvers. Moments later, the pair arrived at the stairs to the surface. "Finally! I'm so sick of being covered in bug guts." Jibrax lifted her fists triumphantly to the ceiling. "After I complete my business, we are returning to hunt more. If everything goes as predicted, we will return in 3 hours. The demon's arms flopped to her sides and her head fell to her chest. Of course, you would say that. With much less enthusiasm than a moment ago, the demon led the way up the stairs, Mud directly behind. End of chapter. Chapter 50. Mysterious Metal Mass. After returning to the surface, the pair found the top of the stairs guarded by a different group of soldiers than had been on guard before. After traveling to the end of the long hall back towards the fortification entrance, they were stopped by a scribe. The scribe was much more suitably dressed in the task than the last, wearing a light outfit suitable for warm summer weather of Galtheus. "Hold it! Are you two?" The scribe paused for a moment and looked at the clipboard. "Jibrax, the Red, and Mud." Jibrax responded with little interest. "We are. So what?" "So what?" The rather doughy-looking scribe adjusted his round spectacles. "You've been down there for 14 hours. "Is that illegal?" Jibrax crossed her arms and smirked, amused by the scribe's discomposure. Well, no, but we assumed you died when you never came back." Straightening up slightly, the unimpressive man tried to switch his lecturing tone. "You really should take breaks every few hours to eat and relax, especially in times like these." Jibrax leaned forward, face looming over closely to the slightly shorter man. "I'm not going to take advice on delving from a pathetic little worm like you." Shoving him to the side, the demon stomped forward as the man stood paralyzed in shock. "Was antagonizing the city employee necessary?" Mud asked. Jibrax giggled to herself. "Absolutely not. I did it for fun. The best part about being a delver is how scared civilians are of us. I bet that clipboard has had my tear written. Did you see his reaction when I insulted him? He practically crapped himself." Jibrax looked off into the sky, smiling faintly. Eyes squinting in thought for a moment, Jabrak suddenly turned towards Mud. "We've a lot of business to take care of, right? So, let's split up. I'll deal with the subjugation rewards, and you can go do whatever it is you wanted." Clapping her hands together, she went on without waiting for confirmation. "Great, we'll meet up here in 5 hours." Before she could flee, the golem's precaution reached her. "We will meet here in 2 hours. Do not cause any problems for me." Fine. Jabrak stormed off, but she wasn't too disappointed. 2 hours was plenty of time to cause countless woes for mortals in a city this large. She just had to be efficient, just like a contractor. Paying no mind to the demon and let loose on the unsuspecting city, Mud slithered away towards the blacksmith's shop. The dwarven smith, Ingert, pounded the red-hot glowing plate metal, slowly fashioning it into a cooking pan. Although it was a disservice to his craft to lose focus, his mind couldn't help but return to the recent custom order. Immediately after the strange child had placed it, Ingert rushed to begin work. While the design itself was not overly complicated, it was unique enough to light a fire in the smith's heart. An unorthodox layout with features that seemed to serve no practical purpose. There must be some aspect of the lad's abilities that could make use of them, although Ingert couldn't figure out what they might be. As he continued to shape the pan, the distinctive chiming of the entrance bell rang out. Could this be the kid? So excited was he to show off his new creation to the customer that he nearly abandoned his current project. However, decades of training won over his excitement, and the partially formed cooking pan was properly removed and cooled. That didn't stop him from yelling out on his craft room, though. "Just a moment, I'll be out in a jiffy." Rounding the corner of the shop, the dwarf's face fell slightly. It was just some civilian customers. Quickly plastering a business smile, he proceeded to sell a set of thoroughly ordinary pans and sharpen a knife. A normal sale. Returning somewhat disappointed to his forge, Ingert once again heard the chime of the door. Rushing back to the shop, he was not disappointed this time. "Mud, you're a bit early, but I've already finished your weapon." As before, the child was rapidly checking every blind spot in the shop. Did this kid have some enemies that would even attack him in a store? Or was he just paranoid? Unable to fight off the urge to boast, Ingert continued, "I told you I would be done in a day, and I do believe I've outdone myself with this piece." Ingert reached down below the counter with his metal arm and hefted up a heap of chains, spikes, and blades, slamming the mass on the countertop. In overall shape, the mass resembled a large octopus. The central structure was a large hollow sphere of metal as large as a man's head. Across the surface of the sphere were dozens of large holes, large enough for fit an arm through. Enough to connect the bottom of the sphere hung 8 thick chains, each of the long as a man's arm. Half the chains featured spikes along their length, and 4 of them ended up in razor-sharp dagger-like blades. 2 others instead ended in curved metal hooks. The other final 2 ended in heavy lumps of metal the size of a fist. While it was unclear how exactly this tool would be used, Ingert was confident in its craftsmanship. Even just swinging the chains around by holding the ball would make a deadly weapon. But the exacting nature of the design made the dwarf feel like there was much more to it than that. Stopping at his erratic head movement for the first time since entering the shop, Mud leaned over the careful to examine the weapon before him. After a few moments, the artificial voice appeared in Ingert's mind. "There are a few divergences from the provided plan, but I assume those are improvements due to your expertise. This result is acceptable." "Just acceptable?" Ingert tapped one metal finger against the sphere, causing a hollow ringing. "This here is top-quality craftsmanship, and the metal has been imbued with the ideal of durability. Nothing short of a tier 5 could damage this. Ibis, you probably won't even need to sharpen the knives unless you cut through metal." "Yes, that is acceptable." Ingert rubbed the bridge of his nose and his fleshy hand. Did he not realize how amazing his work was? Or was the kid just bad at communicating? At least he seemed to like the work, which is more than he could say for the bratty delvers Ingert had done business with in the past. Some even had the gall to make up complaints and try to get a discount. Ingert liked to refuse sales to people like that, claiming it would besmirch his honor to sell substandard goods for any price. The looks on their faces was worth the lost sale. While the dwarf was lost in thought, Mud reached up to the counter and grabbed the weapon. Ingrid looked over, observing how the youth would actually hold the strange apparatus. Unfortunately, the child chose to pull the entire contraption inside its cloak, making it impossible to make out what he was doing with it. A moment later, the boy's entire form seemed to shift and bulge, as though he was moving things with below his cloak and even under the mask. He could just ask how it was used, but that was boring. Instead, Ingrid would try one other method. I have some target dummies in the back you may try your weapon on, to make sure that there's no adjustments I need to make. Want to try? That is acceptable. Excited to finally find out what this mysterious device he had crafted was, Ingrid led Mud into a small field behind the shop, stopping only for a moment to put the rarely used close sign up. End of chapter. Chapter 51. Mechanical Multi-Target Practice. Strictly speaking, beast farms are not necessarily magical in nature. In practice, however, large amounts of magic are required for a functioning farm beyond Tier 1 with any degree of safety. As a result, some of my thoughts on the subject have been included in this book. Countless attempts have been made to artificially raising beasts through multiple ascendancies for the purpose of harvesting their souls. While safe and sustainable when practiced in moderation, history has shown the extreme danger that comes with raising beasts beyond Tier 3. As the being raises in strength, it becomes much more difficult to keep them fully contained. At the 4th tier, mundane containment methods are useless. Even contracts have proven only partially effective, with creatures intentionally going mad or accepting the backlash of escaped captivity. Oftentimes, such programs show early signs of success. Indeed, some high-tier farms function without issue for decades. Problems arise when even a single beast manages to escape. In the event that a beast escapes such an institution, they are often extremely vengeful. A highly powerful, vengeful beast on the loose can do massive damage to civilians and infrastructure. To make matters worse, such escapees have, historically, specialized in stealth and escape-oriented abilities. Even the higher-tier Stapians have much difficulty locating such a beast when they don't want to be found. The nation of Ronaim was slowly destroyed over many years by an escaped beast. By repeatedly striking at farms, poisoning water sources, and performing terrorist attacks, it crippled the nation's economy. Eventually, it was tracked down and killed by the nation's army. By then, the damage had already been done. Shortly after, the nation fractured and the territory was gobbled up by its neighbors. As a result of this and similar lessons in history, most countries in the civilized continent now outlaw the construction of beast farms beyond the 3rd tier. Although this is a sane and logical course of action, some few countries still put caution to the wind and risk high-tier farms. As of the writing of this book, all known countries with farms beyond Tier 3 are countries without nests of Abraxas. One can understand the desperation for such countries. Without a dungeon or a farm, how could a nobility hope to strengthen their next generation with any security? As with most problems involving nations, there are no easy solutions. Excerpt from Magical Ethics. Mud followed the blacksmith outside and around the store to a small field. In one corner grew several olive trees in neat rows. Nearby, thick veins of hops grew in the over-engineered metal scaffolding. In a small field grew a variety of other small plants. On the opposite side of the yard stood 3 wooden mannequins with metal joints. Each was crafted with exquisite detail and highly detailed faces and hands. Were it not for the wooden coloration of the mechanical joints, one might mistake them for living dwarves. Around the 3 targets grass was worn away to display the dirt beneath. Yet the figures themselves showed no signs of damage. Well then, why don't you go show me what you got with that thing? Don't worry about breaking them. Go all out. Ingrid waved his metal arm in the sweeping motion towards the still figures. Go all out was the order, so Mud complied. Rocketing forward by striking the central sphere with a force bolt within, Mud swung his heavy fist forward and first target's face. Hidden within the golem's swinging fist was a large lump of metal. Moments before striking, Mud fired a second bolt and back of the lump. Although hastily constructed, they imparted the smallest extra bit of force into the blow. Behind Mud, Ingert smiled wryly and made a small motion with his fleshy hand. Instantly, the training target became sharply to the side, dodging the strike by a hair's width. Although the enemy was assumed to be inanimate, Mud had nevertheless planned a contingency for it if it tried to evade. Sweeping its rear around as it shot past, Mud wrapped the chains around the torso, securing its grip in the two hooks. Ingert rubbed his hairy chin and the metal hand. Oh, so that's it. But he didn't say that he would use it for defense. The dwarf quickly performed a complex series of gestures with his meaty hand and carefully observed. Just as Mud moved to slice the marionette's neck with one of the blade's tipped chains, it caught sight of two lumbering figures approaching from behind. Once again, the golem was reminded by the full ability of the ability to detect malice, and the two remaining dummies emotionally swung their arms towards it. Rolling backwards, Mud possessed corrupted mana into its chains and imparted them with the concept of freedom from the control of natural laws. The grips of gravity and friction lessened, and the thick chains floated through the air like silk threads. The bladed tips led the way as the chains slid like snakes around the two dummies, dangling their limbs as they tried to redirect their attacks. A moment later, Mud had a blade pressed against all three throats. Ingert clapped loudly, causing an unusual sound of flesh and metal. "That's enough! Get down from there, Mud!" As the golem climbed from the machine, Ingert made a short series of hand gestures, and the dummies returned to their original positions. Throwing a blade across the throat of these things wouldn't do much good, but that display would have certainly killed some brigands. I must say, I was expecting you to block with the chains, not dodge with it and tangle. These enemies are too slow. There was no need to block. At that, the dwarf pouted, and his eyes drifted towards the dummies. Aye, they're durable, but they're too slow. Making them faster would be a cost too much, and I would have to sacrifice some durability. Well, that's just a side project of mine. I'm trying to design a viable artificial warrior. Doesn't require an ego. Snapping out of his thoughts, Ingert placed a hand on his head and smiled apologetically towards Mud. Aye, sorry about that. You probably don't care about my hobbies. Was there anything else you needed adjusting on your weapon? Mud thought back over the test. Everything had functioned as planned. The material's ability to withstand the blows was unknown, but would be very difficult to test. According to the blacksmith, it should be able to withstand any forces the dungeon monsters could unleash. No, this weapon is acceptable. I will leave now. Good to hear it. Goodbye. Ingert waved at the back of the strange child as it rapidly departed. That kid even had a strange way of walking, not staying or bobbing at all. He almost seemed like to be sliding as he walked, thought the dwarf. As Mud finally left, Ingert ran his meaty hand through his beard. If I made some more of those, I wonder if they would sell. It seems too hard to use. Eyes drifting towards his mannequins, he tried to visualize how they would swing the ungainly thing. After a moment, he had a sudden spark of inspiration. Rather than a weapon, what if I used the design for the puppet itself, with a few modifications? A fire lit behind the blacksmith's eyes. End of chapter. Chapter 52. Martial Meeting. Jabrak smiled kindly and waved at the retreating form of the young human child. Held tight in his skipping child's arms was a bag of firestones the demon had given her. It was slightly unfortunate that she needed to simply lay seeds for suffering instead of enacting it herself, but time was short. As if to punctuate that thought, the chime of Gatheus' city hall rang out, signaling a new hour. Jabrax's face fell. The demon had planned to keep a poor track of time so that she could accidentally arrive late for the meeting, but that bell had made the cognitive dissonance required to skirt the edges of a contract frustratingly impossible. With no choice but to comply, she stomped back in the direction of the dungeon entrance. Her mood didn't drop too much, though. She had gotten a lot done in a short time span, and not many contractors would grant such small freedoms to a demon. Being under control of a non-demon was distasteful, but at least she wasn't being controlled by the Archon's food. A contract with a construct was at least the second best option, even if Mud was a slave driver. After a short time, Jibrax arrived at the meeting spot. As expected, Mud was already waiting. When Jibrax came close, Mud sent her usual droning voice. "Give me the money for the subjugation." Jibrax's face split with a wicked grin, her eyes squinting into a crescent shape. She had been looking forward to this. "Oh, that money. I spent it all. It's all gone." She leaned forward and taunted the golem. "I said that I would collect it, but you never told me what to do with it, you idiot." "Understood." Mud simply turned and began moving towards the dungeon. Jibrax deflated. This was the annoying part of working for Mud. It was extremely hard to evoke negative emotions in the golem. The most effective methods were locked by the contract, so the only time that she had managed to make that golem angry was the time with the tea, which was a legitimate misunderstanding on her part. Even abandoning Mud during the goblin hunt was only perceived by Mud as a suboptimal tactical choice. She had hoped depriving resources would work, but it seems that she would need to get more creative to make the golem suffer. Following behind Mud, Jibrax rubbed her chin and plotted his downfall. Cutting swiftly through the crowd and the dungeon entrance, the demon was snapped out of a reverie by the unusual sight that greeted them. Stacked high on both sides of the dungeon entrance were piles of giant caterpillar corpses. While increasing action was normal before a wave, this was escalating more quickly than the demon expected. Even as she watched, another beast crawled out from the dungeon tunnel and was immediately slain by the guards. Taking no notice of the action, Mud continued towards the entrance, blocked as it was by the wall of soldiers. As it drew near, the doughy scribe ran up and stopped the golem. "Hold on a moment." With a short, fearful glance towards Jibrax and a gulp, the scribe seemed to gain more courage as he wasn't immediately attacked. Holding his clipboard up like a shield towards Jibrax, he continued speaking to Mud. The dungeon is barred from entrance. Leader Thagi Ghoul has declared it too dangerous for delving, as the high-tier beasts are starting to climb." Having delivered his message, the scribe gave a short bow and retreated. Jibrax crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. "I didn't think I traumatized him that much." "Pathetic." Turning towards Mud, she raised her arms and shook her head in sarcastic dismay. "Oh no, it looks like we can't kill bugs for 14 hours straight again. We'll just have to go home." Scanning the area around the dungeon, it seemed to Mud wouldn't be taking the easy route. Mouth drawing a line for a moment, the demon tried again. "If we go home, you can meditate on your ideals, maybe even get stronger spell. It's, tactical." The reply from Mud was not what she had hoped. He will remain in the human city and search for ways to gain an advantage in the competition. After that, Mud slithered towards the doughy scribe, who looked extremely unhappy about being followed by the delver. A moment later, he seemed to relax, likely having received a mental message from the golem. Other ways to get achievements. Leader Ghoul has been trying to leverage the contrast as much as possible to help with the wave by encouraging killing large numbers of monsters, so there aren't many alternatives. The only alternative source of achievement is the tournament of the royal family is hosting tomorrow in the new arena that they constructed. Since the dungeon is closed, that's the only real option until the wave hits. A moment of silence followed as the scribe stared at Mud before he spoke again. "It's off that way a few blocks, close to the waterfront, on the same road as the dungeon." The scribe pointed west. Mud and Jibrax immediately set off following the instructions of the scribe. Traveling farther west than they had before, the city continued its steady downward slope. A few blocks later, and the smell of salt in the air grew stronger, a large stone stadium came into view. Looking rather out of place beside the warehouse nearby, the stadium was clearly a new construction. It lacked the corrosion from the salty air evident in the surrounding buildings. The nearby large chunk of debris were still being removed, likely the demolished remains of the lot's former occupant. In terms of scale, it was moderately large, filling nearly an entire block. It was still much smaller than the massive arena in the capital, suitable for fighting dragons, but plenty large enough for a tournament. In the future, it would likely be used for sports and concerts rather than fighting. Entering through the wide arched doorways designed to accommodate heavy traffic, Mud and Jibrax headed towards a short line of people speaking with two seated scribes. Waiting in one line was a familiar group. Being the first to notice their arrival, Susie squealed and ran up to Jabrax. "Jabby, you're joining the tournament too!" Running forward, the black-robed girl gave Jabrax a hug, then pulled back, suddenly self-conscious. "You remember me, right? From the other day? The Raven, and my party, the Raven's Wings." Swinging her arm theatrically, she pointed towards the rest of her group. There, Meld and Kim nodded politely before facing back towards the front of the line, while Ovis waved back with a gentle smile. "So, are you joining the under-20 division? I'd like to see how my magic holds up against you. You look pretty strong, plus, you're Sisla's daughter, right? Strong people have strong families, so you should be amazing. A perfect rival to the Raven." Jabrax placed her hand against her forehead. "His niece, actually, but please stop talking for a moment." The demon held up one more hand at departing Susie and thought for a moment. It was likely that they would have the means to detecting age if they were having an age-restricted categories. Some demi-human races could resemble young humans or looked much older than their actual age to humans. After all, age-checking magic tools were rather cheap besides. Although her preferred disguise was a youthful girl in order to better manipulate people who are soft on the young, it's truth that she was older than 20. Luckily, her appearance could pass for an adult who had just as unusually youthful appearance. "Actually, I'll be joining the adult competition. I'm a bit older than I look." "Wow, you're over 20. What's your secret?" Looking over towards Mud, she continued with a sarcastic tone. "Don't tell me that the kid's over 20 as well." Looking down at Mud, she grinned. "Actually, he's probably a bit younger than you think." End of chapter. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, please consider supporting the author from the link down below. Otherwise, if you wish to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, like liking, subscribing, and possibly even becoming a patron. Otherwise, the easiest way would be to share. And until the next video, I hope that you all have a good one, and I'll see you then. Cheers.